All toy restorations will be handled by the YouTubers controlling each channel. Reproduction parts may not be used where there are Star Wars forums. Toy restorers and collectors are available. Toy-polloi has been assigned.
Welcome to Toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're going to be making a carry net for this vintage removable limb C3PO. Now this was the second version of C3PO released, and it was the one where basically you could take his arms and legs off so you can recreate the scene in Empire Strikes Back where he gets destroyed by a stormtrooper, and then Chewbacca finds the bits of him and puts him in a net and carries him around on his back for a good part of the movie. Now the figure itself is nothing special, it's one that's very easy to find, but what you often can't find is the little net that comes with him. So let's take a closer look at the net and see what we need to do to recreate that. So here we have my C3PO. This is the one that's actually on my display here behind me. As you can see, he's in his little carry net in many pieces, and it's a really nice little feature. I've always thought this was quite a sort of a nice thing that they did for this figure, because it does allow you to recreate that scene, and I think it actually works remarkably well. The only problem with it is it does make Chewbacca a little bit back sort of heavy, so you do have to have a stand with him. If you don't, then the figure does tend to fall over, but the overall way it works I think is pretty good. So what we're going to do today is recreate this net. As you can see, looking at it, it looks fairly complicated, but actually when you take it apart and sort of study it, it's a fairly straightforward shape. It's just sort of got lots of holes that need cutting in it, but the overall shape is pretty simple. So let's take this off the figure and then we can see it in greater detail. So if I remove this, we should be able to get all the bits of C3PO out. Let's take Chewie's gun off. I take his arms back so we can easily remove this. And there we go, that is the carry net. Now it does look complicated, as I say, but actually when you break this down it's a fairly simple shape. It has a couple of edges that have been joined together. You can see here these have been sort of, I'm going to say sonically welded or melted together, but that doesn't really sort of affect how this thing is made. When you sort of flatten it down, you can see that we have this portion here, which is the bit that goes onto the back of Chewbacca, and then we have this section here which we can sort of flatten out. And you can see that this is the bit with the holes cut in it to make it sort of look like a net. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to make some careful measurements, because all I've got to do is sort of measure these shapes and bits, and I'm going to take that into Photoshop and I will make a pattern that matches all of this. It will be flattened out. Obviously at the moment we can't flatten this out. The only way to do that would be to cut these, and this is the only one of this that I have. I don't want to cut this apart, so I'm just going to use sort of careful measurements to recreate this in Photoshop and make a pattern, and once we've got that we can start reconstructing this to make our own version. So let's get a few measurements done and a bit of Photoshop work, and we'll create a pattern. And here we go, here's the pattern all made. So I've essentially taken that net and flattened it out and printed it out on a piece of A4 printer paper. On the back of this I've stuck some double-sided tape. We will be needing that in a little while, and it's easiest to do this at this stage of the process. And now I'm going to start cutting this out. We don't need to cut everything out to start with. I'm essentially just going to cut out the main part of this shape, and the way my patterns are set up, you need to remove the grey line and we'll just be left with what's inside the grey line. So let's get this all cut out, then we can stick it onto some vinyl and cut out the more tricky bits, which is basically all of the holes and stuff. But first up, let's cut the main part out. For the vinyl, I'm using an old blow-up beach toy. I've shown you this many times in my videos. It's a very good way of getting sort of different coloured bits of fairly thin vinyl, and the match is pretty good. You can make all sorts of capes out of this. This is the remains of a killer whale, I think this one was. I'm just looking at what I've got left of it, so you can see the bits of white on here. So I think this was a blow-up killer whale. The black part of it, like this is the tail, is going to be ideal for making this net. So it has two different surfaces. We've got a nice shiny surface, and then we've got the inside surface, which has got sort of a little pattern to it. I want the inside surface to be the outside of the net once I come to actually sort of put this together, but at this stage it doesn't really matter. You can sort of cut it on either side. So here is the pattern, and on the back of this you saw that I'd stuck some double-sided tape. So what I'm going to do is remove the other side of the double-sided tape, and then we need to sort of remove some of the stick from this tape, because if you stick it on now you won't get this off, and we need to remove this at some point. So what I'm going to do is just stick this onto my jeans a few times so that it gets a bit of fluff on it and essentially loses some of its stick. You want it to still be sticky but not really that sticky. We can then stick this on here, and I'll cut out the sort of the outside part of the shape again, and then we'll get to the complicated bit, which is cutting all of the inside pieces out. But yeah, you need to remove some of the stick of this before you stick it on, otherwise you will never get it off. So that's the outside part cut out. Now we need to cut out the little circles. Again, you need to remove all of the grey on these. I'm going to use a different pair of scissors. This is my pen knife here, just so that I can easily sort of cut in this small area. If you're using big scissors, it really isn't that easy to do. I find smaller scissors are much more controllable for this part. So you can see we're now starting to get somewhere. We've got the basic shape when we have the holes around the edge for where it sort of holds onto Chewbacca's arms. Now we need to put the little square holes in that form the net. To do this you will need a scalpel and a ruler, and you've just got to go very slowly, cutting each one out individually and doing it as neatly as you possibly can. There's no quick way of doing this, but it is possible. Just go slowly and go neatly. And there you go, that's them all cut out. And now we come to the key bit, which is removing the piece of paper, and why I told you to reduce the stick on the double-sided tape, because now that we've reduced that, should be fairly straightforward to remove this without sort of causing any problem to the rest of the thing that we've cut out. If you've left it sort of full sticky, it's really hard to remove. If you've just sort of done what I did there and put it onto your jeans a bit and sort of made it less sticky, you can see that we can actually remove this. So I'm just going to carefully remove this. You don't want to rip any of the bits you've cut, so just go slowly with it. And it may be you need to clean it up just with a little bit of lighter fluid just to take some of the stick off. But overall, this is going to come off really nice and easily. And here we go. Here is the net all cut out, and as you can see, it's not looking too bad at all. We've got the sort of net pattern, we've got the bit that hooks over Chewbacca's back. Now on the original it was sort of heat sealed, as I said, or glued along these two edges, but it turns out you don't actually need to do that. By the time we've put this on Chewbacca's back, because those two bits go over his sort of shoulder, that little seam there doesn't actually need to be joined together. It works perfectly well without that, so we're not going to bother doing it. All we've got to do is to put it onto Chewbacca himself. So you can see here we have these two little hoops. Those go over his arms. So let's put those over his arms like so. And then the other two hoops here, again, go back over his arms. So we just hook that one on there. We'll hook that one on there. We can then rotate his arms forwards. And you can now see that we have a net that sits quite nicely on the back of Chewbacca. And you can see that those are the areas that should have been sealed on the original one, but it really doesn't make any difference to how this works. If I put C3PO in the back of this like so, you can see we get exactly the same result without having to heat seal it. And by the time all the pieces are in, it really does look like the carry net. I think that's a pretty good recreation. So if you want to make your own, this is all you need to do. It's just a piece of black vinyl from a beach toy, and then cut out using the pattern that you can get from toy-polloi.com. So there we have it. Now I've now got two versions of Chewbacca with the C3PO carry net. This one on the right is my original, and this one on the left is the one that I've just made. And as you can see, it really does do a very good job indeed. It's not the easiest of things to cut out, just because there's so many little things that you need to sort of carefully cut out. But as you can see, it can be done. If you want to have a go at making your own version of this net, then I'm going to put the pattern for free on toy-polloi.com. So go there, download it, print it onto some A4 printer paper, and get cutting. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to check out some of my other Star Wars cake making videos, as I've covered an awful lot over the years. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow Toy Polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.